In these next few modules, I'm going to show you some different examples of how to design patches, starting off with a bass patch. So I'll begin with the initialized preset, which if you remember is just a sawtooth waveform being generated by oscillator 1. As you can hear, it's got the send effects on, so I'm going to remove them just by turning off those effects in the routing section. And next, I'm going to re-pitch the oscillator a little bit, as you might want to kind of base your presets around a note of C3 or thereabouts, which is in the middle of the keyboard, which is probably a note that someone would play, or certainly would if they were playing a smaller keyboard. And you might want your preset to sound bassy right away, so it's often a good idea to transpose it down. So I'm going to take it down by an octave. Okay, so we're going to start off there. And next I'll choose my waveform. So I'm going to go for one of the factory bass shapes and probably this drive one here. I'm going to start off with this one. It's quite a clean one, but what I'm going to do is use the shaper to add some distortion. So I'll turn on that section and then use the amount here to crank it up. And I'm going to set the mode to the devil one. So it becomes nice and distorted. And now the crux of this patch basically has a filter envelope creating the character of the sound, which is a low-pass filter with a cutoff that slowly opens. Like that. So I'll keep it on the default one, bring the cutoff down for now, and then we use the envelope here to modulate this cutoff upwards, which we can do just by turning up the dial. So at the moment we just got a very rapid modulation where the cutoff is jumping up and then down very quickly. And this is because if we go to the envelope down the bottom, you can see all we have is that very rapid slide downwards. If I increase the decay time though, then we can make it a bit longer. You can make a lot of good bass sounds with that shaped envelope, but what we're going to do instead is increase the attack time so we get that more obvious slide upwards. But what I want is kind of a slide upwards and then a slide downwards, a bit slightly slower one. So I'm going to use the inner ring here to change the decay slope to a more linear one. And then I'll bring the decay time down a bit and play around with the time so I get the sound just the way I want. That's about right. And now we're going to move on to effects. So we'll go over to the effects section here, and instead of using insert effects for this one, I'm going to go to the send effects rack. And I'm going to change the first effect here to a chorus. And then turn this effect back on. As you can see, it's changed to chorus now. And then turn up the amount. So yeah, I like to use chorus as a send effect because it keeps the bass nice and powerful sounding because we don't mess around with that dry signal. And instead we just have a separate channel with the chorus on where we can blend in a specific amount of that so the bass stays nice and strong. Second one, I think I'll change this one to a dimension expander. And then turn that one back on as well. Just turn off my chorus for a second. Now I'm going to keep it as it is, but I'm going to filter off some of this low end so we don't get any problems with stereo information in the bass frequencies. So take that up to sort of 200-300 or so. Obviously it sounds a lot bigger when you do this, but remember that as I'm filtering off these bass frequencies, if you crank that up, then as well as adding that extra dimension, you're also going to add a lot of top end. So the bass is going to get a lot toppier. But we can always fix that with EQ later on. And then the final effects are going to be master ones. So go to that section, I'm going to turn on the EQ, because even if we're not using it, it's actually quite a handy one to have on when you're designing patches, because it allows you to see what your preset looks like. So I can see actually there's quite a lot of higher frequencies going on, which I might want to bring down a little bit. So I play around with my bands here. And I'm going to add a compressor as well. To kind of flatten out and control those dynamics a bit more, so we can turn it up. And then on the end I'm going to add a limiter, which I've started to do with all my patches, so that I can normalize it, or rather make sure it's nice and chunky, but without clipping, without creating any clipping distortion, so we don't go over 0 dBFS. So now I can turn up the input gain until I start to see this tickling the gain reduction meter. And now my bass is going to be nice and loud. Lastly then, I'm going to use the subsection here in the on the left of the oscillator to add some bass frequencies, because at the moment it's a nice kind of chunky sound, but there's not really enough right at the bottom. So I'm going to keep it on sine wave and just turn up the volume here. So yeah, that's about right. Might want to play around with some of these different effects to shape it exactly the way I want, and then go back and maybe get the kind of width and the size of it right too. But overall, I'd say the effect, the preset is there.